Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, everybody. I am here today. I'm so excited. I get to interview Elizabeth Tidwell, and we are going to dive into what is kind of a niche topic, but like also applies to basically everyone. So maybe it's not as niche as I think it is. And I'm so thrilled about that. Could you introduce yourself and just give us a peek at what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth Tidwell. I am a womb guide and certified menstrual cycle coach. So I love helping both adults and kids learn about and discover just how powerful and wise and how much of a huge daily asset our menstrual cycles are. They are always relevant, and it is such a pleasure to help people understand their body in this way that is wildly overlooked and undervalued, but is always very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I didn't know that you could be a certified menstrual guide. What was the process of becoming certified? How did you even know that you wanted to do this?
I did not. I did not. I didn't know this was a thing until it kind of arrived for me. Actually, honestly, if you would have told me before I started on this path, I would have totally laughed because I grew up a super huge tomboy. I was not like my first period I ignored and just did not want to deal with. I had no idea this was coming for me.
Mm.
But after I had a baby, a daughter, a whole bunch of stuff in my life was changing, and I was kind of like, she was about 2 at the time, and I was kind of looking for what was next for me. And then I just serendipitously overheard, like digitally in a big, huge Facebook group, a friend of mine recommend a book called Wild Power to
Ooh.
somebody else, not to me. I just like saw it on the screen and I was like, oh, I love this person and that book sounds interesting, so I'll read it. And before I had even read half the book, I was like, okay, this is what I need to do, because it was the first time reading that book that I had ever heard the message that my menstrual cycle was wise and powerful and mattered. And at the time, I had an IUD in, and
Mhm.
I was just like, I knew that I was kind of like missing something, but that was like, it's this. You are missing on what your body is biologically primed to be doing, not only like for the biology of it, but
Mhm.
also for the kind of psycho spiritual self connection, self awareness side.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I wanted to help people hear this message so much wider and be part of helping people heal and reclaim and come into deeper connection with this huge side of us that's really overlooked.
Oh, I love this. I
So
haven't heard this
after
message.
I read the book, I know that's the thing, is like, there's so, it's not enough. It's not enough. So it was wild because I was in the middle of reading that book, and the authors, Alexandra Pope and Shawnee Hugo Wurlitzer, they run a program once a year, and I looked it up because I was like, oh, I want to hear more about this before I even finished reading the book. And it was like the last week before that year's doors were closing. So it came at the perfect time. I immediately signed up. And before that one, that 6-month container was completed, I was already starting on another coaching certification in menstrual cycle, in the menstrual cycle field. And then I've done another one since, with working with kids specifically with the menstrual cycle. So yeah, like it's just kind of, the more that I love learning, and I love learning about this, and I love seeing how it applies everywhere and how I can help, especially all my trainings I've done through, these are all through Europe. So it's
Oh, wonderful.
much less of a thing over here, but it's starting to pick up a little bit more. But
Yeah.
yeah, we all need this message, and I wanted to help be a mouthpiece for that.
That's amazing. I love it. Um, so w- you have mentioned you mentioned including children.
Mhm.
So do you ever work now with adults, or is it primarily little folks?
Yeah. Yeah. So most of the work I do with kids is in these really special first moon circles. So they're kind of one-time half-day retreats where they get to come and learn.
Mhm.
And then a lot of my work is with adults. Like the one-on-one work is with adults. I do like group coaching programs with adults, that kind of thing. So some of both. And it's really important because I wanted to work with kids because I started finding that uh, if I teach them from the beginning how to engage with their cycle before they even get their cycle, then I won't have to work with them as adults undoing all the things that they had to endure without this knowledge. So, such powerful time of life to learn and then set you up for success and deeper self understanding for the rest of your life. So,
So what age is like menstrual education recommended?
yeah. It's earlier than we might think. My favorite ages to do these first moon circles is about 8 to 10. That age is still really open and curious. They may have already heard a little bit about periods, but they haven't absorbed nearly as much menstrual shame and, kind of all the extra messaging hasn't gotten to them quite as much. And also, they haven't gotten the brain development to be nearly so peer focused and self conscious. So
Mhm.
they come to these first moon circles and they're excited, they're talkative, they're engaged, they're willing to learn, and it's all new and all exciting. And then hopefully we're catching them well before they do start so that that is their main message of menstruation at that age instead of having to undo some of the other cultural messaging that they will be exposed to the more time they're on the earth.
Yeah. Now, I started my cycle at 10. Would my daughter be expected to start around the same time?
Yeah, it is not always quite that like scientific. It's not like, oh, you started at 10, your daughter will start at 10, her daughter will start at 10, you know what I mean? But that is definitely a good indicator. If you did that's earlier
Yeah.
than average. So for sure, especially if you know that your period started early, I would for sure make sure that your own child is prepared on the early end as well, because it is far more likely that they will start younger than somebody whose mom started when they were 16 or something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I also have boys. How do you view educating boys? Because we have this whole generation of men who are like, ew, icky, and half
Mhm.
of our population bleeds. Like, it's such a weird reaction to something that's so normal.
Yeah.
And certainly there are men who don't act that way, but I have also certainly seen men act that way. How do we change that?
Yes. Oh, I love this so much because my goal is to change the entire culture around the menstrual cycle, which includes men and boys and people without periods. Like it includes all of us. So, um, I think a huge part of that is that it's not just this thing that girls deal with. Like I really love so I also create first period kits and sell them. And I always am advocating for parents to buy one for their boys so that
Mm,
their boys have in their backpack a little first period kit so that when their friends or peers or somebody they see, if they're if they see some blood or they've got a girlfriend who's like, I need a period product, they are already well aware of
mhm.
what this is and they can show up with such compassion. And like, can you imagine being that guy friend who all the girls know you can go to that person if you need a pad or a tampon or something? Like, can you imagine what middle school would have been if all the boys had period kits in their backpacks and like knew how to look out for each other? So that is like a simple way. And the period kits that I make come with a little bit of education in them as well. That's what makes them different from a lot of just the period product kits that you'll buy it anywhere else. So it gets a little bit of an introduction about what to expect. And that is a great way to start having the conversation with boys because boys are curious too. And
Right.
boys, if we don't like show up and model for them that this is normal, this is okay, this is part of life, and this is something that we can offer empathy, compassion, understanding, and not treat as something weird or gross. This is just the same as any other, you have to go to the bathroom, you have to yawn. Like, this is just what bodies do.
Yeah.
It's fine, right? Like, it's not weird, it's not gross. But of course, it starts with normalizing it, open conversations in our homes so that then they can take that outside of the homes and be that example for their friend circles,
Mm-hmm.
and start pushing back against the larger cultural narratives that everybody's going to be exposed to. But when you start from this foundation in our homes, with our friends, in these safe places that have such a stronger positive message than the pervasive cultural messaging that they'll get, it's just an entirely different way to engage. And that is always what I advise starting with first.
I love that. I remember in high school there was one boy. It was on the bus, and a girl got her period, and she stood up, and a boy kind of stood up and like wrapped his arms around her with his hoodie,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he whispered to her, like she was in my seat. He's like, "You started your period," and she started crying. He's like, "I have 5 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good." And it actually makes me emotional now because he wasn't grossed out.
Yes.
It was so normal to him, and he knew what to do to protect her and make her feel okay. And she was getting off the bus to go home, so it wasn't like he didn't have to give her products or anything, but it was just this compassionate moment
Yes.
that could have been humiliating for her. And yeah, I want to see a whole culture that acts that way.
Yes. Yes. And the thing is, like, it's totally possible. It is totally possible. It is not even that hard because, again, if we start when they're young, they're open, they're curious, they're already empathetic and compassionate.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know what's going on for people. They ask questions. You know what I mean? Like, my daughter's 5, and she's just observing so much about the world, and it's like, and she knows about menstruation, she knows about periods and blood and all those things, of course.
Yeah.
But it's like, don't hide that from your boys either, because they are curious, and if they start from this place of curiosity that's natural and normal, and we don't shame them for it or feel like they're weird because they shouldn't be asking questions about my body. No, this is normal human curiosity regardless of gender and regardless of experience, which can then just snowball into such beautiful acts of compassion and empathy and community building. And yes, I think this can absolutely ripple into just such a better way of relating to each other as peer groups with kids and teens and preteens in general. Like,
Mm-hmm.
think about it. Like, you're not gonna like be bullying somebody in general if you literally just gave them your sweatshirt because they started their period. You know what I mean? Like, it just sets us off on the right foot from the beginning.
Yeah. And speaking of beginnings, apparently this is controversial. I had no idea, but my toddlers always walked into the bathroom while I was going to the bathroom. That's just, I didn't realize that there was a whole like argument on Instagram recently about this. Um, it would never occurred to me to do anything different. They're babies. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that led to conversations where it was like, "You're bleeding." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Well, yeah, like that's something that women do." And they're like, "Are you hurt?" No, not really. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
my body, how did I explain it? I said, well, my body has a uterus. I just use the words that are
Yes.
medically appropriate words. I was like, my body has a uterus, and that body part will hold a baby if I get pregnant. But if I don't get pregnant, it has to clean itself out. And that's how it does it. And it does it for a
Yes.
couple days, and then it's all done.
Oh,
And I remember, I want to say my son was like 3. And mostly he just wanted to make sure I wasn't like injured. But
yes.
he was like, oh, and then he was fine. He didn't have any kind of negative response. He was just like,
Exactly.
oh. And I think we underestimate sometimes how weird we make
Yep.
it. Like
Yes.
everything about sex, actually, like bodies and sex and that whole topic, we're like, oh, they're too young. It's good. Like, but are they? Like, are we so opposed to talking about knees and elbows? Like, why are we so
Right.
opposed? I mean, even actually, I could be, I suppose, kicked off of platforms depending on, I mean, I guess we're 14 minutes in, so probably not YouTube, but some of them, if you use certain anatomically correct words, then they will like boot your video. Like,
Yeah.
this is a body part, y'all.
I
Um,
know. I know.
so In your education with parents, do you ever mention like the safety component of using anatomically correct body terms?
Yeah, so I definitely am a huge proponent of all of this for many reasons, but just like normalization that yes, this is a huge component. If kids know what the body parts are, they can then build a foundation of, what is for who to see or touch, or
Mhm.
how does it feel, or how do I clean it, or what, you know what I mean? Like, why
Yeah.
can I show my elbows in class but not drop my pants, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like, this just is, again, we just catch them at their normal questions, which we do with so many other things,
Mhm.
right? We do with so many other things. It doesn't have to be weird, but of course I really want to be careful not to make it sound like this is parents' fault. It is not.
Right.
Most of us just, I mean, we aren't taught, we aren't modeled, and so we just perpetuate what was shown to us. This is
Mhm.
why we have the culture we do, because this
Mhm.
was what we were given. And
Yeah.
so yeah, if you this is like such a big part of my work, because I'm like, I recognize that this is how we are showing up as parents because of how little we got. And it was weird. And we just immediately learned to disengage and feel weird about asking questions. And we immediately learned, oh, I shouldn't ask about that. Something's wrong or weird about that.
Mhm.
But we as parents now have so much influence on their attitudes. So yes, a lot of my work is helping parents and adults normalize for their own bodies
Yeah.
that they just have a body and it's okay. Like, yeah, we don't doing that work of undoing the taboo and the shame in our own bodies is where we have to start. Otherwise, of course, even without meaning to, even with the best of intentions, it will be more of an uphill battle to not
Mhm.
unintentionally pass that on.
Yeah.
But there is so much we can do to really honor ourselves and our bodies, in a way that we can show up with neutrality and positivity for our kids.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that our kids really look to us, and I would say that you mentioned something which is so true. In the adolescent period, they start to turn more towards their peers typically. And some of that is appropriate. Some of that I think we can make sure that we're still an important part in their life. Um,
Mhm.
but our kids do look to us to see how do we feel about things? How do we manage difficult conversations? How do we handle their questions?
Yes.
And I am of the belief that almost all questions, I don't like to use absolutes, can be answered in an age appropriate way.
Mhm.
And certainly about our bodies, like they're humans.
Yeah.
And for any of you homeschoolers out there, this is anatomy. This is
Yes.
biology. We're doing science. Um, and I think that we also maybe underestimate the sprinkling the seeds effect, where, if it's just a normal conversation, I'll say out loud in my house, I didn't think I'd be so open about my own cycle. So I can feel like a little bit of like, oh, I'm not supposed to talk about this, right? I can feel that in my own body.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll just say, I'm like, oh, I need to go change my period underwear because it's my preferred method of management, before we go out, right? We're going to be gone for a couple
Yes.
hours. And I'll just say it and then go upstairs.
Normal.
And so it's normal in my family. And
Yes.
I can tell my husband, he's like, why are you saying that out loud? Not because he has any issue with me. It's more him thinking about the boys usually and like, is that going to be weird for them? And I told him, I was like, okay, but if it is, that's something we get to change.
Mhm.
We want it to be so normal that whenever they are around women who have a cycle, they can be the boy in the room that's not like, ew, gross. Like, I just
Right.
want it to be normalized.
Yes.
And so far, that seems to be working. And they are really open. They're 11 and 9. And so they're just like, okay. Like, they
Yeah.
just don't care, which I think is great for 11 and 9.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and then my 5-year-old daughter, she's fascinated, and she's just like, she asks lots of questions because she gets herself very involved in the whole process. um and I so okay, two questions. One, um what is normal in terms of discomfort, and is that something you discuss with girls? Because I mean, I remember having friends who would have to skip school because they couldn't walk. Like it was so
Mm,
uncomfortable.
mhm.
And I have actually been having some issues myself very recently. I never had a terrible cycle, but that's actually been how this conversation has come up very recently in the past couple months is like, I am in so much pain. What is happening?
Mm,
So I was thinking actually about my high school friends that one of them in particular who
mm.
really struggled. Um, and I imagine that's not super normal.
Nope.
So what do
No.
you tell girls in these circles about pain and pain management and when to maybe see a doctor?
Yeah, I definitely bring that up that it's like ideally and honestly the way it's designed, your body it shouldn't be this hugely debilitating thing. It
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't take you out for days of the month. That is too much. Honestly, it should be um honestly pretty mild. Pretty
Mm-hmm.
mild. Our periods were designed to feel pretty mild. And when it's not, yes, here's some things that you may look out for in conjunction because what I try to teach them is that I talk a lot about more than just the period, but the full menstrual cycle and how it
So
works
smart.
and how
Yeah.
we feel differently in different phases and how we need to take care of ourselves differently in different phases. It's not just about the
Mm-hmm.
pain on the period because the our periods are like a fifth vital sign. So
Oh.
our bodies use our menstrual cycle symptoms
Mm-hmm.
as communication about other things a lot of
That
time. It
tracks.
can be, yes, it can be physical things. It can be a physical imbalance or something that
Uh-huh.
needs attention in some other place, or it can be mental, emotional, energetic.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids who start young, like start with pain young. Honestly, the womb is a receptive organ, and it's like we when we are formed as babies, we come with all of our eggs,
Yeah.
right? Like they develop. And so it's like we have this echo, this energetic imprint. We were an egg inside of our mom who was a baby inside of our grandma. So sometimes it can be stuff that's not even ours to carry. So I
Yeah.
do a lot of this like psycho spiritual exploration of like what is trying to be expressed um in like what is your cycle telling you beyond this is painful. A lot of the time it's take care of yourself, some other times it's something else,
Mm-hmm.
but like there's a lot we can do for pain, so they should not be debilitating, they should not be impeding your life like that. And there are so many things that we can do about them, and I definitely make sure I let the moms and the kids know, so then we don't like end up, so many of our generation ended up in doctors offices, and doctors will they've only got three things to tell you basically: get a hysterectomy, get on birth control, or deal with it. Like
Mm,
that's there's just not that much. I mean, it's changing a little bit slowly,
yeah.
but in the vast majority of cases, that's what's going to be the knee-jerk response in a doctor's office is just don't deal with it. Let's put you on a pill.
That
And
is
we
exactly what
don't
they
want
do.
to do that when they're young. Yeah, we do
Yeah,
not.
she got on birth control really young to try to
Yeah.
manage her cycle. So, I like the idea of exploring other options at least. I'm not going to shame somebody who makes a choice that they
Yes, of
need.
course.
And I know you aren't either. I do think it's helpful to have at least options to discuss and explore and see. For me, I had a C-section a while back, and the patterns that I'm noticing are possibly indicative of endometriosis, where that
Mm,
like scar tissue kind of grows outside.
yeah.
So I might need to set up a call with you and explore some energetic stuff first. But I do think that I'm going to end up having to see a doctor because, oh my goodness, you're right. It shouldn't be debilitating. And when it is, um, something needs to change. And that's,
Yes.
I had seen a functional provider and have been trying some herbal things for about 3 months and it's not getting better. So next step,
Mm,
please.
yes. And
um,
again, like there's so many ways. I like to, especially with my adult clients, I
mhm.
like to kind of tell them that what we're doing in menstrual cycle work is just learning the language of your body.
Mm, That's
So you
beautiful.
don't have to outsource, don't feel like you have to go to a doctor to tell you what's going on for you. It's just like, yeah, really building this two-way communication relationship with your body that most of us don't know how to do. Most of
Mhm.
us have been told to like turn that off or like don't believe that or like of course you can't, you have to go to a doctor. And obviously there is certainly a time and a place for that and lots of help that can be offered through medical intervention. But there's just also so many ways we can support ourselves and so
Mm.
many other things our body will greatly benefit from, even if, um, every single symptom doesn't magically erase. It honestly sometimes feels like magic to just learn how to communicate with your body. And that is what your body's asking for a lot of the time, even just as the foundation before it can, start resolving some of these other things with
Yeah.
more direct, or medical intervention, that kind of thing. But it is always a useful avenue to start to build that relationship with your body. And again, recognizing that our menstrual cycle and our symptoms are the language that it uses, right?
I love
So,
that. I think that's so valuable. Um, so you just at the beginning of that answer had mentioned that the menstrual cycle is a whole cycle, and I, as you said that, I was like, well, I do know that. I've done fertility awareness stuff, but I was definitely thinking 7 days of bleeding. So
mhm,
it's almost a little bit of a myth buster there that the cycle is a cycle the whole time.
mhm. Yep.
What other myths have you encountered when you're working with kids? Like, what are things that they're coming in thinking or believing that you're like, okay, hold on.
Yeah. Honestly, it's just a lot about they just have so many questions that they want to ask directly, but feel like they can't, like, or just like they just want to know things. And so a lot of the time the biggest myths are pain, the biggest myths are how much blood, the
Mm,
biggest myths are, yeah, like most don't realize that honestly it medically is called an ovulatory cycle because ovulation is far more important for our bodies than you know what I mean, like that is the main event of your menstrual cycle. So we talk about a lot about that, like the difference between a lot of them have no clue, or even moms, like about what discharge is or why or when in the cycle that's going to appear and what that means, and just
that's
how
a big myth. There was a
yes.
TikTok trend of girls showing their dry underwear and like bragging. And I'm like, oh, oh, no, 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 we're not
No,
going to demonize
no,
discharge. This is an important part
no,
of your body.
no, it
No, no,
is
no,
so
girls.
important. Yes. Yes. So yeah, like honestly, especially the younger ones, they have far less specific myths that I need to bust. The older we get, the more honestly, like I feel like a lot of adults don't realize how much they could benefit from menstrual cycle coaching because they're like, "Oh,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
had periods for decades and you just deal with it and it's whatever." And I'm like, "Yes, but there's so much more. There's so much more.
Yeah.
And there's so many of us were just never taught, and so many
Mhm.
ways that we could really use our cycle and the different, honestly, our hormonal landscape changes every single day. And so that's relevant to how we show up in every aspect of our lives. But
Yeah.
most of us just override it, ignore it, or think it's a problem with us. And it's not.
Right. Right. And we live, I mean, it's a little soapboxy, but we do live in a culture that is designed around men's ability to kind of show up the same way every
Yep.
day.
Yep.
And there is few and far between spaces that recognize that women's bodies have a flow to them. And there
Mhm.
is days and times and sections of our cycle where we're, at least for me, like I'm way more productive and I get a ridiculous amount done. And then there's other
Yes.
times where I'm like, I need rest right now. And that's something that I've been, trying to express gratitude to the health challenges I've had recently, that it has called me to honor my body's need for rest.
Mhm.
And if I, maybe needed a louder call than it could have, okay, well, I'm learning, I'm
Yes.
practicing, I'm
Yes.
getting better.
Yeah. And again, it's never on us, I feel, because again, we just weren't given opportunities. We weren't given models. We weren't given education. We
Mhm.
weren't given any of the tools that we need to recognize this. In fact, we were given the opposite. We were given total cultural and direct messages from people and examples. Don't talk about it, just deal with it. It's gross. Of course it's in your head. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and the sense, yes, our culture is designed around the male hormonal pattern. Of course we are going to think it's a problem with us.
Yeah.
Because we haven't seen that it could be anything different, but it is. It is very different. Our infradian rhythm, that menstrual cycle rhythm, that, you know, longer than 24-hour male hormonal clock matters and is not a bug. It is a feature that we absolutely can optimize and harmonize with to stop beating ourselves up for showing up exactly how we're supposed to show up and how we're primed to show up, and then work with that instead of against it.
Oh, I can just imagine like these teenage young women that are able to learn these things so much earlier than me. Oh,
Yes.
I love it.
Yes.
And I do want to say, you know, there's a quote, and I don't know who originally said it. I've seen it kind of all over, that is referring to our mothers. Just because they didn't break all the generational cycles doesn't mean they didn't break some of them.
Yes.
And I remember so clearly my grandma telling me that I wasn't allowed to go play outside because I was on my period. And I remember I started at 10, so, and it was on my period, so it's kind of emotional. And I was like, I was shocked. I was like stunned. I was like, what? And I started crying, and my mom saw me and she's like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, Grandma says I'm not allowed to play outside when I'm on my period. And she's like, that's ridiculous. Of course you are. Go play. I'll deal with her. And it was this beautiful moment of breaking that you know, myth that apparently had existed in my family, that my mom was like, yeah, no, you're not going to be stuck inside. Like, what freaking difference does it make, really? And could it have been maybe that my grandma was like, oh, well, maybe your body needs more rest, and she wasn't quite communicating in it that way? I don't know. It's possible. But I was, you know, a 10 or 11-year-old girl who just wanted to go play outside. So I wasn't looking with empathy. I was looking with aghast.
Yes.
And I'm really grateful that my mom was able to kind of put her foot down in that way. And I look forward to helping my daughter to balance, you know, yes, your body is going to need different things at different points, and I want you to honor that. And, you know, there are things that you can do to support yourself to also do the things you want to do during your cycle. Because I think that's really empowering for a lot of girls. And I think that's one of the cool things about the advancements in technology, that we have so many options.
Yes. Yes. Well, and even like, I always make sure to show the girls and kids period swimsuits and period underwear, because I'm like, I remember from my 5th grade maturation class, it was so weird, so awkward. I was a shy kid. I was like, I'm not into this. I don't want to hear about it. But I was on swim team and I was really worried about that, but I was way too shy to ask about it. And so like that was like a big stressor in my little childhood life for a few years, was like, what do I do with my period? What if I start when I'm swimming? Or like, I swam all the time. You know what I mean? So like, it seemed so huge, and I didn't feel comfortable asking. And there wasn't something like a period swimsuit. So now I'm like, listen, guys, you don't have to tackle an internal product just to go swimming like I had to as a kid, and honestly did not put a tampon in right the first time, and it was in a ton of pain and it was the worst, but I wanted to swim. And so I'm like, the beautiful thing is you have options, because a lot of the times, like, especially when they are first starting, a lot of them don't want to, like, it feels intimidating to try an internal product, which I'm like, great. That's why I'm showing you, you have options, you get to choose. And thankfully there's so many options out there so that you get to support your body and your lifestyle and what you want to do in the best way for you. And there's no shame around choosing whichever product you want to use. It's about you and how you support your body. So even that alone is just like wildly different than probably how most of us were taught. It was just the concept that like I remember there was like stigma around using pads when I was like in 6th grade. And now but I was like way too intimidated to use a tampon. And now I'm like, that is nobody's business and it has nothing to do with anybody else. So you get to use what you want to use. And
Right.
also, good news, there's lots of options now, not just two. So, yeah, just so much more handing the power back to kids and the power that comes through knowledge and choice, I think is
Mhm.
so huge. And the ability to ask questions. Another big thing with these first mid circles is I keep them really small. I never have more than 10 kids unless it's like a special event, but where the kids would know each other more, because I want to preserve the intimacy that comes as we spend like 3 hours together. They get to know each other, but they also get far more comfortable to ask the questions that they are too scared to ask their moms or their peers or the
Mhm.
teachers or whatever. It's like, this is what we're trying to do, is make it so easy for them, remove any barriers,
Mhm.
so they can get the information that they actually want and need to ask. So,
It's so smart to do it in circle format because so many adolescents and preteens, they are intimidated to be the one in the hot seat, to have to vulnerably
yes.
express like I have this question or concern. But when they see other kids doing it, they're
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, we can do that here. And
Yeah.
they it just makes it feel safer for them. So I love that you have these. Are these only in person?
No, I also offer them online. And I also offer them private. So I offer like a public circle every 2 to 3 months. That's my goal. Whether that's in person or online. But always, if you have like a special group, family, sports, friends, dance, homeschool, whatever, I can also do private, which would mean on your schedule, more like flexibility with that. And also, it can be either online or in person. So
So
definitely,
smart.
again, with my goal of like, I want to change the entire culture. I know that more than just this very local area that I'm in needs this.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely trying to make it as accessible to as many kids and families, because we all need this
I
together.
totally agree. Okay, so very last question with our last couple minutes. What does menstrual culture look like in your perfect world?
Mm. Oh, well, kind of a lot of the things we've been talking about. Kids start learning when they start asking questions. Kids aren't um protected or shielded, or it's not hidden. It's just normal. Also, that includes parents recognize how important the menstrual cycle is. So, if you have a menstrual cycle, you talk openly, like you were sharing about. It's just a normal part of life. I would love to see more like fridge charts where like different family members can put like, here's a magnet of where I'm at in my cycle, so we can all have a menstrual cycle aware family, whether you've got a period or not.
Yeah,
And again, it's like every bathroom has multiple period products, whether that's in public or in private. Like, it's just normal. I would love to see the day when, like I said, everybody, regardless of gender, has period products on hand for everyone, and everyone honors, not just like deals
tolerate.
with
Yeah.
periods. Yeah, but like, actually, okay, you are on fire with the intuition that comes in this cycle phase, and you are really seeing through all the extraneous details, and you've got like this side of your cycles coming out. So like, actually utilizing the superpowers of our menstrual cycle phases
Mhm.
throughout all the context where it's relevant, which
Mhm.
again is always. So like, I would love to see this from the beginning of life all the way through past fertility years, and really honoring the wisdom that comes once your cycle's complete. Like, there's so much.
I love how
Yeah,
you speak about this. My daughter and I will definitely be traveling to Utah to see you in person in a couple years because I want
love
her to
it.
have that experience. I want
Yes.
her to love her body. I want her to feel confident and attuned. And I know a couple of women who are, and I love that about them.
Mm.
Um, and I want that for her.
Yes.
So I'm excited about it. If somebody wants to reach out to you to join a circle or maybe set up something private with you or anything like that, how can they do that?
Yes. So my website is myclubred.com. You can also always follow along on Instagram at myclubred, but on my website, it's broken down into like age, like stage of life. So there's a first period menarche stage, and that's where all you'll find all the resources for first period or first moon circles, first period kits. I'm also in the creating a course right now because I'm realizing that moms didn't learn this stuff. And also, I am only going to be in these girls' lives for a few hours, but moms will be there forever and they need to become the expert and learn the things that they didn't learn. So I'm creating a course right now to help moms fill in some of these gaps and know what to expect with teen periods and like actually how do I show up and like how do I make a period positive home. That's also, you can find all of that under the menarche first period section of my website.
Awesome. Next, can you make a class for dads on how to not be weird about their
Yes.
daughter's periods?
Yes.
You can call it
Yes.
something better. But one, I actually work with several single dads, excuse me, who will probably be having this conversation with their
Yes.
daughters, and they're like, I don't know what to do. So they would appreciate that education. But also, I'm sure there are moms watching this going, yeah, my husband's one that needs to, you know. Um,
Yes.
so
Yes.
how brilliant to have a private video session courses, whatever that looks like for you, where you can learn and become educated and get yourself right before you approach your young daughter.
Yes. Yes. And I actually like the more I do this, I love, love, love when I get quite a few requests that are like, oh, I only have boys and they're curious and I want them to know. And also, do you have something where like boys need a class about learning about their bodies too? So like big plans
It's
for
expanding.
expanding full family. Like, again, it is not just girls and moms that need this. I cannot say that enough. It is everyone. And so, yes, I love that you brought that up. That is definitely something that is in my plans because it is so, so, so needed and
Yeah.
so welcome for, the guys to show up this way and really start partnering with all of us better and showing up for our kids better and also just changing the culture as a whole. It cannot just be those with periods. So, yes, big yes to
I'm
that.
so glad that our paths crossed. Thank you so much for being here today. This is a really exciting topic, and I think you are honestly changing lives for the better. So thank you for doing your work.
It is honestly such a pleasure. I love what I do, love talking about it. So, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you're a cycle breaking parent and you're tired of doing this alone, join Create Your Sure Family, my group coaching program for parents who want to heal their inner child, create secure attachment with their children, understand their kids' unique brains, and most importantly, feel sure of their parenting. We would love to have you. You can find out more by visiting www.sureparenting.com and checking out the group tab under coaching.